Section 12. The Dream as Wish Fulfillment. When, after passing through a narrow defile, one suddenly reaches a height beyond which the ways part, and a rich prospect lies outspread in different directions, it is well to stop for a moment and consider whither one shall turn next. We are in somewhat the same position after we have mastered this first interpretation of a dream. We find ourselves standing in the light of a sudden discovery. The dream is not comparable to the irregular sounds of a musical instrument which, instead of being played by the hand of a musician, is struck by some external force. The dream is not meaningless, not absurd, does not presuppose that one part of our store of ideas is dormant while another part begins to awake. It is a perfectly valid psychic phenomenon, actually a wish fulfillment. It may be enrolled in the continuity of the intelligible psychic activities of the waking state. It is built up by a highly complicated intellectual activity. But at the very moment when we are about to rejoice in this discovery, a host of problems besets us. If the dream, as this theory defines it, represents a fulfilled wish, what is the cause of the striking and unfamiliar manner in which this fulfillment is expressed? What transformation has occurred in our dream thoughts before the manifest dream, as we remember it on waking, shapes itself out of them? How has this transformation taken place? Whence comes the material that is worked up into the dream? What causes many of the peculiarities which are to be observed in our dream thoughts? For example, how is it that they are able to contradict one another? Is the dream capable of teaching us something new concerning our internal psychic processes, and can its content correct opinions which we have held during the day? I suggest that for the present, all these problems be laid aside, and that a single path be pursued. We have found that the dream represents a wish as fulfilled. Our next purpose should be to ascertain whether this is a general characteristic of dreams, or whether it is only the accidental content of the particular dream, the dream about Irma's injection, with which we have begun our analysis. For even if we conclude that every dream has a meaning and psychic value, we must nevertheless allow for the possibility that this meaning may not be the same in every dream. The first dream which we have considered was the fulfillment of a wish. Another may turn out to be the realization of an apprehension. A third may have a reflection as its content. A fourth may simply reproduce a reminiscence. Are there, then, dreams other than wish dreams, or are there none but wish dreams? It is easy to show that the wish fulfillment in dreams is often undisguised and easy to recognize, so that one may wonder why the language of dreams has not long since been understood. There is, for example, a dream which I can evoke as often as I please, experimentally as it were. If, in the evening, I eat anchovies, olives, or other strongly salted foods, I am thirsty at night, and therefore I wake. The waking, however, is preceded by a dream which has always the same content, namely, that I am drinking. I am drinking long draughts of water. It tastes as delicious as only a cool drink can taste when one's throat is parched. And then I wake and find that I have an actual desire to drink. The cause of this dream is thirst, which I perceive when I wake. From this sensation arises the wish to drink, and the dream shows me this wish as fulfilled. It thereby serves a function, the nature of which I soon surmise. I sleep well, and am not accustomed to being waked by a bodily need. If I succeed in appeasing my thirst by means of the dream that I am drinking, I need not wake up in order to satisfy that thirst. It is thus a dream of convenience. The dream takes the place of action, as elsewhere in life. Unfortunately, the need of water to quench the thirst cannot be satisfied by a dream, as can my thirst for revenge upon Otto and Dr. M, but the intention is the same. Not long ago, I had the same dream in a somewhat modified form. On this occasion, I felt thirsty before going to bed and emptied the glass of water which stood on the little chest beside my bed. Some hours later, during the night, my thirst returned, with the consequent discomfort. In order to obtain water, I should have had to get up and fetch the glass which stood on my wife's bed table. I thus, quite appropriately, dreamt that my wife was giving me a drink from a vase. This vase was an Etruscan cinerary urn, which I had brought home from Italy and had since given away. But the water in it tasted so salt, apparently on account of the ashes, that I was forced to wake. It may be observed how conveniently the dream is capable of arranging matters. Since the fulfillment of a wish is its only purpose, it may be perfectly egoistic. Love of comfort is really not compatible with consideration for others. The introduction of the cinerary urn is probably once again the fulfillment of a wish. I regret that I no longer possess this vase. It, like the glass of water at my wife's side, is inaccessible to me. The cinerary urn is appropriate also in connection with the sensation of an increasingly salty taste, which I know will compel me to wake. Such convenience dreams came very frequently to me in my youth. Accustomed as I had always been to working until late at night, early waking was always a matter of difficulty. I used then to dream that I was out of bed and standing at the washstand. After a while, I could no longer shut out the knowledge that I was not yet up, but in the meantime I had continued to sleep. The same sort of lethargy dream was dreamed by a young colleague of mine who appears to share my propensity for sleep. With him it assumed a particularly amusing form. The landlady with whom he was lodging in the neighborhood of the hospital had strict orders to wake him every morning at a given hour, but she found it by no means easy to carry out his orders. One morning, sleep was especially sweet to him. The woman called into his room, "Herr Pepi, get up, you've got to go to the hospital." Whereupon the sleeper dreamt of a room in the hospital, of a bed in which he was lying, and of a chart pinned over his head, which read as follows: Pepi M., medical student, 22 years of age. He told himself in the dream, "If I am already at the hospital, I don't have to go there," turned over and slept on. He had thus frankly admitted to himself his motive for dreaming. Here is yet another dream of which the stimulus was active during sleep. One of my women patients, who had been obliged to undergo an unsuccessful operation on the jaw, was instructed by her physicians to wear by day and night a cooling apparatus on the affected cheek. But she was in the habit of throwing it off as soon as she had fallen asleep. One day I was asked to reprove her for doing so. She had again thrown the apparatus on the floor. The patient defended herself as follows. This time I really couldn't help it. It was the result of a dream which I had during the night. In the dream, I was in a box at the opera and was taking a lively interest in the performance. But Herr Karl Mayer was lying in the sanatorium and complaining pitifully on account of pains in his jaw. I said to myself, since I haven't the pains, I don't need the apparatus either. That's why I threw it away. The dream of this poor sufferer reminds me of an expression which comes to our lips when we are in a disagreeable situation. Well, I can imagine more amusing things. The dream presents these more amusing things. Herr Karl Mayer, to whom the dreamer attributed her pains, was the most casual acquaintance of whom she could think. It is quite as simple a matter to discover the wish fulfillment in several other dreams which I have collected from healthy persons. A friend who was acquainted with my theory of dreams and had explained it to his wife, said to me one day, "My wife asked me to tell you that she dreamt yesterday that she was having her menses. You will know what that means." Of course I know. If the young wife dreams that she is having her menses, the menses have stopped. I can well imagine that she would have liked to enjoy her freedom a little longer before the discomforts of maternity began. It was a clever way of giving notice of her first pregnancy. Another friend writes that his wife had dreamt not long ago that she noticed milk stains on the front of her blouse. This also is an indication of pregnancy, but not of the first one. The young mother hoped she would have more nourishment for the second child than she had for the first. A young woman who for weeks had been cut off from all society because she was nursing a child who was suffering from an infectious disease, dreamt, after the child had recovered, of a company of people in which Alphonse Daudet, Paul Bourget, Marcel Prévost, and others were present. They were all very pleasant to her and amused her enormously. In her dream, these different authors had the features which their portraits give them. Monsieur Prévost, with whose portrait she is not familiar, looked like the man who had disinfected the sick room the day before, the first outsider to enter it for a long time. Obviously, the dream is to be translated thus: "It is about time now for something more entertaining than this eternal nursing." Perhaps this collection will suffice to prove that frequently, and under the most complex conditions, dreams may be noted which can be understood only as wish fulfillments, and which present their content without concealment. In most cases, these are short and simple dreams, and they stand in pleasant contrast to the confused and overloaded dream compositions which have almost exclusively attracted the attention of the writers on the subject. But it will repay us if we give some time to the examination of these simple dreams. The simplest dreams of all are, I suppose, to be expected in the case of children, whose psychic activities are certainly less complicated than those of adults. Child psychology, in my opinion, is destined to render the same services to the psychology of adults as a study of the structure or development of the lower animals renders to the investigation of the structure of the higher orders of animals. Hitherto, but few deliberate efforts have been made to make use of the psychology of the child for such a purpose. The dreams of little children are often simple fulfillments of wishes, and for this reason are, as compared with the dreams of adults, by no means interesting. They present no problem to be solved, but they are invaluable as affording proof that the dream, in its inmost essence, is the fulfillment of a wish. I have been able to collect several examples of such dreams from the material furnished by my own children. For 2 dreams, one that of a daughter of mine, at that time 8.5 years of age, and the other that of a boy of 5 1/4, I am indebted to an excursion to Hallstatt in the summer of 1806. I must first explain that we were living that summer on a hill near Ostsee, from which, when the weather was fine, we enjoyed a splendid view of the Dachstein. With a telescope we could easily distinguish the Simony hut. The children often tried to see it through the telescope, I do not know with what success. Before the excursion, I had told the children that Hallstatt lay at the foot of the Dachstein. They looked forward to the outing with the greatest delight. From Hallstatt we entered the valley of Eschon, which enchanted the children with its constantly changing scenery. One of them, however, the boy of 5, gradually became discontented. As often as a mountain came into view, he would ask, "Is that the Dachstein?" Whereupon I had to reply, "No, only a foothill." After this question had been repeated several times, he fell quite silent, and did not wish to accompany us up the steps leading to the waterfall. I thought he was tired, but the next morning he came to me perfectly happy and said, "Last night I dreamt that we went to the Simony hut." I understood him now. He had expected, when I spoke of the Dachstein, that on our excursion to Hallstatt he would climb the mountain and would see at close quarters the hut which had been so often mentioned when the telescope was used. When he learned that he was expected to content himself with foothills and a waterfall, he was disappointed and became discontented. But the dream compensated him for all this. I tried to learn some details of the dream. They were scanty. You go up steps for 6 hours, as he had been told. On this excursion, the girl of 8.5 had likewise cherished wishes which had to be satisfied by a dream. We had taken with us to Hallstatt our neighbor's 12-year-old boy, quite a polished little gentleman who, it seemed to me, had already won the little woman's sympathies. Next morning she related the following dream. "Just think, I dreamt that Emil was one of the family, that he said Papa and Mama to you, and slept at our house in the big room like one of the boys. Then Mama came into the room and threw a handful of big bars of chocolate wrapped in blue and green paper under our beds." The girl's brothers, who evidently had not inherited an understanding of dream interpretation, declared, just as the writers we have quoted would have done, "That dream is nonsense." The girl defended at least one part of the dream, and from the standpoint of the theory of the neuroses, it is interesting to learn which part it was that she defended. That Emil was one of the family was nonsense, but that about the bars of chocolate wasn't. It was just this latter part that was obscure to me until my wife furnished the explanation. On the way home from the railway station, the children had stopped in front of a slot machine and had wanted exactly such bars of chocolate, wrapped in paper with a metallic luster, such as the machine, in their experience, provided. But the mother thought, and rightly so, that the day had brought them enough wish fulfillments, and therefore left this wish to be satisfied in the dream. This little scene had escaped me. That portion of the dream which had been condemned by my daughter I understood without any difficulty. I myself had heard the well-behaved little guest enjoining the children, as they were walking ahead of us, to wait until Papa or Mama had come up. For the little girl, the dream turned this temporary relationship into a permanent adoption. Her affection could not as yet conceive of any other way of enjoying her friend's company permanently than the adoption pictured in her dream, which was suggested by her brothers. Why the bars of chocolate were thrown under the bed could not, of course, be explained without questioning the child. From a friend, I have learned of a dream very much like that of my little boy. It was dreamed by a little girl of 8. Her father, accompanied by several children, had started on a walk to Dornbach with the intention of visiting the Rohrer hut, but had turned back as it was growing late, promising the children to take them some other time. On the way back, they passed a signpost which pointed to the hameau. The children now asked him to take them to the hameau, but once more, and for the same reason, they had to be content with the promise that they should go there some other day. Next morning, the little girl went to her father and told him, with a satisfied air, "Papa, I dreamed last night that you were with us at the Rohrer hut and on the hameau." Thus, in the dream, her impatience had anticipated the fulfillment of the promise made by her father. Another dream, with which the picturesque beauty of the Aussee inspired my daughter, at that time 3¼ years of age, is equally straightforward. The little girl had crossed the lake for the first time, and the trip had passed too quickly for her. She did not want to leave the boat at the landing, and cried bitterly. The next morning she told us, "Last night I was sailing on the lake." Let us hope that the duration of this dream voyage was more satisfactory to her. My eldest boy, at that time 8 years of age, was already dreaming of the realization of his fancies. He had ridden in a chariot with Achilles, with Diomedes as charioteer. On the previous day, he had shown a lively interest in a book on the myths of Greece, which had been given to his elder sister. If it can be admitted that the talking of children in their sleep belongs to the sphere of dreams, I can relate the following as one of the earliest dreams in my collection. My youngest daughter, at that time 19 months old, vomited one morning, and was therefore kept without food all day. During the night, she was heard to call excitedly in her sleep, "Anna Freud, strawberry, wild strawberry, omelette, pop." She used her name in this way in order to express the act of appropriation. The menu presumably included everything that would seem to her a desirable meal. The fact that 2 varieties of strawberry appeared in it was demonstration against the sanitary regulations of the household, and was based on the circumstance, which she had by no means overlooked, that the nurse had ascribed her indisposition to an over-plentiful consumption of strawberries. So, in her dream, she avenged herself for this opinion which met with her disapproval. When we call childhood happy because it does not yet know sexual desire, we must not forget what a fruitful source of disappointment and renunciation, and therefore of dream stimulation, the other great vital impulse may be for the child. Here is a second example. My nephew, 22 months of age, had been instructed to congratulate me on my birthday and to give me a present of a small basket of cherries, which at that time of the year were scarce, being hardly in season. He seemed to find the task a difficult one, for he repeated again and again, "Cherries in it," and could not be induced to let the little basket go out of his hands. But he knew how to indemnify himself. He had, until then, been in the habit of telling his mother every morning that he had dreamt of the white soldier, an officer of the guard in a white cloak, whom he had once admired in the street. On the day after the sacrifice on my birthday, he woke up joyfully with the announcement, which could have referred only to a dream. "Hermann eaten all the cherries." What animals dream of, I do not know. A proverb for which I am indebted to one of my pupils professes to tell us, for it asks the question, "What does the goose dream of?" and answers, "Of maize." The whole theory that the dream is the fulfillment of a wish is contained in these two sentences. We now perceive that we should have reached our theory of the hidden meaning of dreams by the shortest route had we merely consulted the vernacular. Proverbial wisdom, it is true, often speaks contemptuously enough of dreams. It apparently seeks to justify the scientists when it says that dreams are bubbles. But in colloquial language, the dream is predominantly the gracious fulfiller of wishes. I should never have imagined that in my wildest dreams we exclaim in delight if we find that the reality surpasses our expectations. End of section 12.